Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Jian Sangat Ji, and welcome to the breakfast show from the one and only lovely London studio. I hope this is Sari Chaddi Kala de Vich and I've had a good week and looking forward to today's show. And as you know, every week we try to bring some different guests to talk about different subjects, and specifically, as much as we can, those taboo subjects that we never really hardly get to discuss in our community. So aaj the jada program hega is around that, where I have Kiran Dhillon, who's here with me to specifically talk about learning difficulties in the Asian community, as well as physical difficulties. And we're going to find out a little bit about the work that she does, but also how she's been able to help support such thing as learning difficulties within the Asian community. So let me go over and introduce her. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
And to talk about a subject which, as I said, is a taboo subject. I don't think I've had anybody actually to come on to talk about physical or learning difficulties. So tell me a little bit about, yourself and the work that you do.
Okay, so basically I started off in the drug and alcohol field actually 10 years ago, and I was working with offenders who are coming in and out of prison due to issues of substance misuse, complex needs, mental health difficulties, and my role was to kind of rehabilitate them into the community without getting them into working in the custody cells. So whilst I was doing that and working with kind of substance misusers, I was also working with, in my voluntary time, in the charity sector, and working with other humanitarian organisations that I feel that I could contribute to bring change. One of the things we were also looking at, I was also looking at, is working with females who had suffered domestic violence. I was also working with organisations where there was physical and learning difficulties present. I'd also worked abroad in Mexico and Morocco, working with children that were left in orphanages by drug-using parents. I'd also worked in Mexico, where I'd worked with females that were being sexually trafficked by cartels. So I've kind of been all around. I've put my fingers in a lot of pies recently, and even prior. So after that, I kind of went into a topic called hate crime, and I started working with victims of hate crime. I know hate crime is quite big these days, around issues where there was race, religion, if they were experiencing crime against sexual orientation, disability, and all sorts really. So now I'm not in that. I'm in a complete different sector. But the reason why learning difficulties has been so close to my heart is because my sister, which is Dhillon, right here, has been diagnosed with speech developmental delay, not from birth, but from, I would say, around the age of 2 years old.
Tell me, because that's what we'll say. Tell me a little bit about that. How did it happen?
Okay, so basically she was born, normal birth, no issues, and no issues at the time of birth with my mum either. What happened was, when she was really young, we took her to India, simply to see my grandparents at that time, and she was 2 years old, which was quite early anyway for her. When we went there, she got quite sick, and she contracted acute malaria. When she did contract acute malaria, they took her to the doctors there, and it was more or less in the village. So, taking her to the village, not the best treatment, but they gave her glucose injections,
right,
but in the wrong part of her body. So, from what I was informed, it was supposed to be in her arm, but it was given in, near her brain.
Right.
And from that point, she just got worse. And my family then took her to the city. And they said at that time that they couldn't support her at the time because they didn't know what was going on with her. It was best for them to bring her back to England, back to the UK, and get her checked in other hospitals here because they couldn't figure out what was going on with her.
Yeah.
She was crying constantly, her tongue was expanding, her speech was slowing down, her cognitive well-being was slowing down, and she just wasn't communicating as much. Her reaction to a 2-year-old baby wasn't really the same. So, obviously my parents got scared and my family got worried. So we brought her back, and at the time, I think we took her to every hospital there was, Great Ormond Street, Charing Cross, anywhere that could kind of support. And they did say that they couldn't really figure out what was going on, but she was then diagnosed a while later with speech and developmental delay. And they said that what happened, that her cognitive well-being, her reaction to the brain had slowed down a lot with that injection. So although she was 2 years old at the time, or 3, 4, whatever, her reactions would be slower than her actual physical age.
Yeah.
She's 28 now. She turned 28 last week. But from what we see now, her mental age is not at 28.
Yeah.
I would say it's probably in her probably 12, 13. Right. So from that point onwards, we brought her back and we got her into certain kind of services, but at a time back in the day there wasn't really a lot available. And also, coming from a Punjabi family, I don't think my parents had the knowledge at the time to know what to do or where to go. And it was a taboo. I still believe it is a taboo, but at that time it was more or less a taboo subject that no one really knew about. This was in 1980s.
Yeah.
So we took her back to India, and she was left in India with my grandparents for a little while, and she came back here when she was 5 or 6.
Right.
And from that time, I was about 2, 3 years older than her. I took over her care, even though I was young myself. I wanted to kind of be the person that would advocate for her. So I remember being around 7 or 8 years old and going to my first social services meeting for her, and because my parents didn't know that had that level of English.
Yeah.
It was important for me, also being the eldest one of the family, to make sure that I was putting it in the right places, was getting the right support, but that was again through networking. So yeah, from 8 years old I've been her carer.
But how has it been in the community? What kind of challenges have you faced?
I think at the beginning, when we were younger, it was quite difficult. If we took her out somewhere, and if we took her out to a family function or even the Gurdwara or anywhere, we would have people kind of giving her certain types of looks. Sometimes she acts out of her behaviour, and they'd kind of be making comments. I'd hear comments. It got to the point where I could see that the level of ignorance was a lot.
Yeah.
Then it got to the point that we stopped taking her out for a little while because it was just getting too much. And I was growing up as well, and for me to see my sister have fingers pointed at her and people say things to her and make nasty comments, because again, that's the level of ignorance. They didn't understand what was going on. So it was a lot. It was difficult, and I realised that support services in the Asian community for mental health or disabilities, it's still a very much taboo topic. Similar to drugs and alcohol, it's a topic that people want to know about but don't know how to touch it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Even now to this day, although there's social media has given us a really wide platform on bringing those issues to the surface, it's still very much, people are still unsure how to be around her, how to act around her. Only the other day we went out for her birthday, and at the restaurant the waitress didn't know how to kind of communicate with her, although she was doing a lot of the talking, and you could just see it. So I think it's more or less, there are many services out there that are putting kind of pushing the idea forward about disabilities, but I think more's needed. I'm very fortunate enough that throughout the work that I've done in my paid role and my voluntary roles, I've made those connections, and I've been able to kind of get her into the right services because I have been able to be so proactive with her. Yes, there has been a time in the family where you do get kind of stuck. Where do you go to? Who do you go to? If you have to if you have to leave her by herself, you can't really leave her by herself because there's a risk of her hurting herself. And social services, which they're great in what they do, they really are, but again, the support that we need and the support that a child needs in this situation isn't fully there, because there's so many other disabilities that are more important, if you can say.
And in terms of the work that you've done, so obviously you know what to do. You've kind of educated yourself on it through the work that you do. So for our viewers that are watching, if they have someone in their family who may be suffering from a learning difficulties, or even if it's physical, what advice would you like to give them in terms of what should they be looking out for?
Okay.
But where can they go then?
Okay, I think in terms of diagnosis wise, it's really important to have the right diagnosis. We had no idea speech developmental delay even existed until the doctor told us. So making sure that the right diagnosis is actually given to the child. There's many forms at the moment. I mean, physically there's obviously cerebral palsy, there's all sorts, and there's obviously autism. and ADHD and speech developmental delay. So there's a lot of that. I think the right diagnosis is very important, because only then you can figure out what support service, what care package that client will need, what that service user will need. And in terms of accessing support, we're from the local borough, we're from Hounslow. So I've been able to liaise with a charitable organisation called Speak Out.
Okay.
And they simply work with children that have learning difficulties. There's no criteria. You can be any age, you know, as long as you are willing to kind of engage with them, they will engage with you. They give the respect as well to service users. They don't call them service users or anything like that. They kind of, or disabled children or adults, they call them members. So it's kind of giving them a sense of responsibility, membership. And what they do is a load of activities with those children and adults. So Aman's been working on a program called Travel Training.
Okay.
So she can't access London Transport by herself. And that is because she doesn't understand the routes. She doesn't know where she's going. There's a fear of stranger danger. And I've had to really push her for the last few years to work with the organisation to make sure she can either cross the road properly, but still we have problems because she doesn't know that the car's coming, or there's certain things she just can't do, you know.
But has that improved over time? Like, say, talk us as to how much and in what sense has it improved?
That's a good question. When she was younger, there were certain things that she couldn't do at all. So, for example, she couldn't have a bath by herself. She couldn't use the kitchen accessories by herself. She couldn't cook for herself. And she just couldn't, you know, there's a lot of things that were preventing her. So somebody had to be with her at all times. Now, it's more or less she can use the microwave. She can tell the time on the 24-hour clock sometimes. You know, she's learning her ABCs and her 1, 2, 3s. She's able to kind of have her bath, but one thing she can't master is also washing her hair, which I do every 2 days for her. So there's certain things she can do, there's certain things she can't. Her speech is, I think, developing. I can see that is getting a little bit more clearer. But the repetition of her behaviour, her memory loss, it still exists. So I'm hoping, I mean, there is no medication for the disability, you know, for the difficulty. So that we know but doctors did say from a young age that as she grows older, it will get better. It
will get better, okay.
But 4 years ago, she was diagnosed with epilepsy.
Right.
So research does show that, you know, children and adults who have learning difficulties are prone to also being epileptic. So she had her first fit, I think, 4 years ago, first seizure, and she was given various types of medication. The medication didn't suit her. So from that point, it's been a challenge because we have to make sure what medication goes, what medication suits. Sometimes she reacts to it, sometimes she doesn't react to it. And then last year she had a really big one as well. So again, you know, it's kind of, it coincides with the disability, with the difficulty. And it's just about managing it, really. So it's like, I do often think, what more does she have to kind of go through?
Because that's what my question was going to be. So are there any other than that, any other health-related issues that could occur that you might know of? Or again, is that something you're not, apart from seeing the fact that Aman had an epileptic fit, is there anything else that you are aware of that could, you know, be as...
At the moment, no. Epilepsy has been the main thing. Her blood sugars drop at random points as well. So, you know, we never know when she's going to be sick. We never know when she's going to react to the light. We never know whether, I mean, sometimes when she has her seizures, they are so, it's quite panicky because we never know if she's going to make it, because, you know, this year there was a certain point where she had one and everything just changed, and which, you know, we can't really speak about. But I think at that point it was more or less, I didn't know whether it was related to disability or whether it wasn't related to disability, but sometimes her seizures are a few minutes long and sometimes they can go on for a long time. She reacts differently to each one. And when she's out the other side, it's like she's more or less doesn't know what's going on, disorientated for a few days, feeling sick, not eating well. And then again, more medications given. So we've had many neurologists check up on her, doctors, and, you know, so that's the kind of end result of having learning difficulty. That research does show that 4 out of 5 families will experience that.
And how has it been
children.
for your family now?
It's been, I think I've spent a lot of time with her. I think the more I've done with her, the more I've put in a lot of energy and effort with her, I've seen better results. I think as the years go by, there is that fear, what happens next? I think with any family, and with any family who has a child with learning difficulties and disabilities, you never know what's going to happen, and you never know what the end result is. You know, I mean, coming from Punjabi background, there's that talk of marriage, there's talk of settling down, there's talk of, my parents getting older, and it's like, what happens to Aman? So I think for me, she's my main priority, hence why I am her guardian and I will take care of her. But it's that fear of the unknown, it's the fear of everybody will get on with their lives and what will happen to her, where will she go? And can you rely on anyone else, because nobody else has really been there on your journey with her. So it's been, when we were younger, it was much more difficult. There wasn't the support services around. There wasn't people around to kind of say, hey, come and join this service, this is how we can support you. There was no one reaching out. So, and I know many families now as well, especially with people who can't speak English, with parents who, I've seen it with her when we go to college and when I go to take her to appointments, when I go to hospitals. I've seen families who are from actually British minority ethnic my backgrounds, and they, when you approach them, they're unable to speak English, and then when you ask them what's happened, they just don't know what to do, and they're there simply with the hospital letter because they've been told to come there, but they have no idea what's happening with the child or the adult. So it's about, how do you support them? We're fortunate that I am an advocate for her, but at the same time, it's like those families have nowhere to go, and they don't use social media, they don't use support services, the council does not get in touch with them. They might be getting their welfare and benefits, and maybe an offer for respite, but I know, coming from that, from an Indian family, I don't want to leave my sister with anybody, from somebody who's not been around her that long. We had issues even for carers coming over to the house because they weren't giving her the right support, and I'm an advocate for that right support, because if you aren't giving her your 3 hours of your time to my sister, then that's money that we can be saving and investing in her ourselves.
I understand.
So yeah, I mean, the services, there are a lot of good services out there. I think now going forward, what's really important is making sure those services are kind of orientated towards families who have language difficulties, who have a lot of questions around disabilities, who have fears, what will happen next to my child or my adult. And that's where I think the loophole is, and it is still a taboo, more or less. I think since I've been working with her a lot of this year, I've seen more and more families open up to me saying, Kiran, you know what, my son's like this and my child's like this, and this is what we're worried about. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, the next few years, I'm thinking about opening up, a centre for children, where especially geared around the Asian community, where they can come and drop their children off for some respite. We can teach them things,
Because that's what I was going to ask now. Do you think more work needs to be done in our local Gurdwara like that? Maybe a workshop, or someone like yourself who can be the advocate, or the rep that can actually maybe go and speak to other people. And I know that not so much one person can really do on their own, but in your experience of the work that you've done, do you feel that's something that could be set up through the Gurdwara, or, because we need to do more in the community?
Of course. I think at the moment I have accessed some, and I've seen what they do have surgeries, drop-in surgeries, once a week in the weekday. But what they're there for is helping children with their benefits, forms, legal documentation that needs to be completed, for example, PIP referrals and welfare benefit work. But that's just the paperwork side of things, and that's a really good service. It's a really good service, because I know if I'm not around, my mum would go to that service. I know if there's not other families who can't speak English and need help with documentation for children, adults with learning difficulties and disabilities themselves, would go to the service. But it's on a day where I think it's not really accessed, because a weekday everyone's working, and it needs to be more kind of on the weekend, and kind of sociable hours, kind of orientated around that time. But I think in terms of going in and developing a workshop, I think yes, that's more or less it's needed.
Okay.
Maybe doing something on a Sunday, you know, for an hour where all the children get together, and children and adults that will learn physical disabilities get together, and every week we talk about a topic. I know Speak Out, when I referred her to Speak Out, and I've been liaising with them regularly because they obviously work where I do. We went to something called CCP meeting, and what the CCP meeting is, it's for children and adults with disabilities, that they're in a forum and they talk about issues that are affecting them.
Right.
A similar meeting to like what we would have, but they talk about, you know, what do you find is difficult for you on the buses, or how do you feel we can change, you know, the travel training, or what issues are you facing right now in the community that you feel are affecting you. And it was amazing to see her when I took her for the first time. She was raising her hand, she was answering questions, even though they weren't correlated to what the question was.
Yeah, but still,
she was, you know, she was saying, you know, oh, I want to help people, I want to be a nurse. So she has ambition, and it's really nice to see each individual child and adult with physical disability and learning difficulty putting out there what they really want to be or what they want to do. And it's just very humbling. It's humbling. It's just beautiful. And I think that niche, they're not seen.
Yeah.
They're more or less invisible.
Yeah.
So I think more or less those meetings need to be pushed forward into the community, into more on a wider perspective. Definitely in the Asian community. I would love to set something up like that. So,
but this is what I was going to say. We're going to give your details. We've got about 5 minutes till the break, and we will give your details, because I was thinking, obviously, you know, as a channel, we're worldwide, so there might be somebody there who might want to reach out to be able to support you. So we'll give your details for that, so people can get in touch. But what I do want to ask is, how's your experience been looking after, you know, your sister who's got the learning disability? How's it been for you?
It was tough. I think, if I'm honest, it's been tough. There's been a lot of criticism. You know, there's been a lot of this is how you should do things, this is not how you should do things. But my answer to that is, you are not in my position. And it's when I was younger, I mean, I've been her my earliest memory is I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
And this child came to my door, and my mum said, "This is your sister." And I was like, I didn't know I had a sister. And it was difficult because I had to be the mother in a way, but in a way, I mean, we had our mum, which is, you know, she's amazing, but it was more or less just focusing on her. And a lot of my childhood, I remember going to a lot of meetings, a lot of forms being signed, a lot of, you know, people in uniform asking me questions, going to a lot of hospital appointments with her. I remember her screaming and crying because she wasn't in India anymore, and UK was a whole new country for her.
Exactly, yeah.
And as I grew older, I realised that it's been tough. It has been tough. It's not been easy, but luckily with the networks and the support that I've got from people and the contacts that I've made, and she's received a lot of support. I've received a lot of help, especially this year. And now we're using platforms such as this to kind of get the word out that, you know, learning difficulties do exist, and it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah,
it's nothing to be worried about, because that was more or less my thing. I was very anxious, very worried, and with the experiences that she had when she was younger anyway, with people commenting on her and making remarks, and, you know, it broke our confidence. So, but now it's like, no, this is who she is.
Yeah,
she's a female in her own right. She has feelings, she has a mind, she can't communicate well, she's trying and she's progressing very well, so I will do my utmost best to make sure that I can advocate on her behalf.
Yeah.
And she also has a voice. So now what we've done, we've signed her up into Great Ormond Street internship program. So one of her things on her bucket list was that she wants to be a nurse.
Yeah.
So what we've done now is signed her up to the internship in Great Ormond Street to help sick children. So she'll be doing that from next year as well.
Okay.
So I just want her to be the best that she can be.
Yeah.
And she's my little legacy.
And I want to ask, actually, Aman, what are you doing at college next week?
On Wednesday.
What are you doing? Music, cookery.
Cooking, English, and music.
Cooking and music.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. And a happy birthday to you as well. I heard that you're going to be doing loads for your birthday, so thank you so much. But
Thank
Kiran,
you.
please give your details as well. If anybody watching wants to get in touch, how they can get in touch with you, even if it's to support you or to be a part of this.
Okay, great. So you can email me on kirandhillon1@live.co.uk. And you can always contact me on 07718 946 255. That's 07718 946 255. I'm more than happy to take referrals in for children and adults that have disabilities and difficulties, because I want to be able to kind of work with them and provide that one-to-one support as well. I'm more than happy to do kind of a group exercise, and especially for Asian families, if you want someone to kind of work with you and want advice or support, for someone who's been through the channels, I'm more than happy to communicate with you over the phone and give you support around that. So I'm more than happy to help.
But keep up the great work and the great seva that you are doing. It's amazing and nice to have Aman here and yourself today.
Thank you so much.
And Sangatji, really quickly before we go to break, please do get in touch if Tadakul, in your family or anyone that could be suffering from a learning or physical disability. These are the subjects that we don't talk about. We have an amazing sevadar here who's doing the work for her sister. Please get in touch, and if you didn't manage to get the details, you can always contact us. We're happy to share them with you. But please don't go anywhere. We're going to go for a short break and then we'll be back with another guest. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.